Rabbi Emma Gottlieb. I'm so glad you could be here with us today at Christ Our Anchor's virtual service. I have here Emma's official bio, but I'm just going to interject that Emma and I met in our 20s as pretty young, fresh ministers up in way upstate New York when we were living up there, very close to Canada. And she has just been a dear friend ever since. But she is also a very impressive person, and I want to tell you about her. Rabbi Emma Gottlieb is from Toronto, Canada, and is the newest member of Temple Israel's rabbinic team. Rabbi Emma received ordination from Hebrew Union College at the New York campus in 2010, and subsequently held pulpits in small congregations in New York, Boston, and Toronto. Rabbi Emma brings her infectious energy and love for Torah, music, teaching, and prayer to her rabbinical ministry. It has been particularly meaningful to Rabbi Emma to be one of the first women rabbis in South Africa, to present a different perspective on what a rabbi is, does, and looks like. She hopes to inspire the women and girls in the community to own their Jewish stories and experiences, and to embrace what it means to be an empowered and educated Jewish woman. Emma, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, and it's an honor to be included in this beautiful project of yours.
Well, my priority is for everybody to hear as much as they can from you, so we're just going to dive right into the questions. And I was telling other guests in these dialogues that everybody's being asked the same questions, but I'm thrilled because everyone's coming at it from such a different angle with different answers. So let's dive in.
Great.
The first question is, how does your identity in the world, so you being born in your body, in your time and place, your identity, shape your faith and your calling?
Thanks. That's such a powerful question. So I'm a white, cis, heteronormative or heterosexual Jewish woman. And each of those comes with its own set of privileges or disadvantages. So, as a white person, I can access white privilege. As a Jewish person, I'm part of a history of anti-Semitism. As a woman, I experience gender bias and all of the beautiful things that the patriarchy has handed down to us. And so all of those, that sort of complicated web of all of the different pieces that make up my identity. And of course, there's many other pieces of my identity too. I'm crafty, I do knitting, I like cows. Like there's all sorts of, I have dogs. All of those things, are part of not just who I am, but how I view the world and other people. And as a rabbi, they inform, or they remind me, I guess, of how complicated each person is, and how unique and special each person is, and that all of us are coming with a complicated mixture of privilege and disadvantage and history and trauma and experience and wisdom and family, and that we can't make assumptions about one another until we are in relationship with one another and getting to know one another. And at the same time that we can also draw on our own personal experience when relating to others and ministering to others. I think also for me, the particulars of my own identity have directed what path I've taken in my own spiritual journey. Being a woman has meant that there are only certain branches of Judaism where I can fully participate, where I can be and be recognized as a rabbi. And so that's also made me mindful and grateful to be part of a branch of Judaism that is accessible to people no matter what background they are, what race they are, who they love, how they identify, and and it's, you know, it's highlighted for me the complexities of religion and religious diversity, and all of that is wrapped into my rabbinate, into my faith, and is sort of an ongoing conversation and dialogue.
I love that. I mean, I think I've told the church before that that's one of the most inspiring things to me about the various Jewish expressions of faith is that idea that faith is an ongoing conversation. It's you're never done. You've never arrived. You're always learning and growing. Um, my second question for you, friend, is can you tell us a story of a time when you had an aha moment about the world and about your place in it?
When I was a rabbinical student, you know this, Jesse, but for your congregation, when I was a rabbinical student, I had a boyfriend who got very sick and ended up with a traumatic brain injury from his illness. And that was a really difficult experience in my late 20s, and left me with a lot of questions afterwards about suffering, about why we go through the things that we go through in life, and the pain of grief and loss. And in my very first pulpit in Plattsburgh, New York, where we met, there was a family where the father also had a traumatic brain injury from a different set of circumstances. And because I had had the experience that I had in rabbinical school, I was so much better able to be present with that family and minister to them and sit in their suffering with them and hold them and hold space for them and all of the things that we're called to do as clergy. And as a young rabbi and a new rabbi, I don't know that I would have been able to hold that family as successfully and as meaningfully as I was able to if I hadn't had the experience that I had had. And while it doesn't justify or make it okay that I had to go through that, and that my boyfriend at that time had to go through that, it still felt like very eye-opening to me in that sort of epiphany way that you're asking about, that the hard experiences that we have as human beings can be a source of strength and an access point in my rabbinate, and that ultimately I would be a stronger, better rabbi if I was able to draw on the painful parts of my life as well as the joyful parts of my life. That was really, really informative and powerful for me as a young rabbi, and has continued to really shape and inform my rabbinate.
Amen, Emma. Thank you for sharing that and reminding me of that part of your story, how formative it really was. I think that it's so crucial in these days where there's so much suffering globally, for us to be mindful of the ways that we have worked through or are continuing to work through our own personal suffering. So that kind of connects to my third question for you. You gave, when I asked you about your identity, you gave all these markers and these things that people see. So if I was to share the identity of our church, whether we like it or not, we are a majority white, middle class, Protestant congregation. Some of those markers are things that are very common to a lot of other churches in these times. And I'm wondering what you wish churches like ours were thinking about and talking about right now.
Yeah. That's all of these questions are so beautiful. I'm so glad that you're asking these questions and giving your community access to different answers to these questions, because they're so important. I think I would want your community to be talking about privilege. You just gave some markers of your community, white, middle class Protestant. So I would want your community to be talking about white privilege, economic privilege, and Christian privilege. Um, and to really to have those conversations in a way where, or to come to those conversations without feeling defensive, because I know that conversations around privilege, and especially white privilege right now, can be so triggering for so many people. And I think when we haven't had a chance to really sit and talk about what is privilege and what does it mean, we can feel like other people are attacking us when they point out our privileges. But really, when we sit and talk about privilege in its nuances, we learn that privilege isn't something that you did wrong. It's just something that you have. And like I was saying at the beginning, each of us also has, depending on our different identity markers, a unique combination of privileges and disadvantages. So women in your community may have white privilege and economic privilege and Christian privilege, but they have disadvantages of being a woman in a world that still is very biased towards women. So having white privilege doesn't mean, or economic privilege, or Christian privilege, or all three, doesn't mean that you don't also have disadvantages. And there are people who have white privilege who don't have economic privilege. There are people who have economic privilege who don't have Christian privilege. So it's really important to sort of diffuse that conversation and learn about it together. And also, once we are able to say, okay, these are the privileges that I have and these are the disadvantages that I have, and that's okay, because it's not something you did that was wrong, it's just who you are. Then to say, how can I balance out the privileges that I have for other people who don't have those privileges, which is a little bit like carbon off, what's it called? Carbon offsetting, right? Like when you add up how much carbon you're using in the world and then you figure out how to offset it, right? I feel like conversations around privilege are really similar. That if I say, okay, I have white privilege, and I live in South Africa right now where there are lots of people who don't have white privilege, is there something that I as a white person can do or can access or can give back to the community to help offset or to help balance out, or to help strengthen the privilege of others, so that we're able to move towards a society where we don't need to say, oh, this person has this privilege and this person has that privilege, but where we have more equality and more equity among us. Those are really hard conversations, and they take a lot of time and patience and love and generosity and acceptance of self and others. So I know I'm charging you not with an easy conversation, but I think in the world right now, and in America especially right now, everybody needs to be having these conversations, not just your church, but everyone.
Well, I know your community is also having very difficult conversations of your own. And it seems like for all of us, doing that inner work will create external social change, that just holding these tensions together, learning to tolerate these seeming contradictions in ourselves and hold them together. That connects well to kind of a more personal question for you, Emma, and that is, when you think about the labels that you walk around with, the way that people interpret you, what you know they see, or the impressions they get, whether those impressions are true or false, you know what people see when they see you, but what do you think would surprise people about you? What do you wish people knew about you?
I always like to sort of joke that I was a person before I was a rabbi. And I still am. I mean, when we strip away all of those labels that we've been talking about and identity markers, each of us is a human being, and I think part of the answer to the first question that I was thinking afterwards I should have included, but comes here too, is, for me, I'm very rooted in the Jewish teaching that each of us is created in the divine image, and that each of us is holy and has a spark of divinity within us. And I think, that I'm just like everybody else. I don't want to be seen, I don't want to be put in a box, with a label any more than anyone else. I'm just a person, and I happen to have a relatively unique profession and calling, but I also have a family that's flawed and dysfunctional like everybody else's family. I struggle with anxiety like everybody else in the world right now. I get afraid, I cry, I get heartbroken. We're all human, and I think that's also the most important thing we can do right now to heal the divides in our world, is to take a step back from all the labeling that we're doing and just look another person in the eye and see their humanity and their divinity. And at the end of the day, that's really all that should matter.
Thank you so much for that. And that connects well to my last official question for you, which is, do you have a scripture or a story in your scriptures that has particularly uplifted you during these times or emboldened you in these times?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many good ones to choose from. We have such a beautiful, rich biblical tradition that we share, and I'm not sure how much I've been drawing on texts that have emboldened me in this time, but I'm definitely drawing on texts that are comforting and reassuring. And two of the lines that I draw on from the Psalms, especially in difficult times, are the line where it talks about that there's a darkness, but the joy comes in the morning. And the verse that says, those who sow in tears will reap in joy. And both of those connect to my favorite story about a king who sends who sets a task for his advisor to find something for him that will make him laugh when he's sad and will make him cry when he's happy. And there's a whole long story, but eventually they bring him a ring and it says, this too shall pass. And that reminder that when good times are good, we have to really hold on to them because they don't last forever. And when bad times are bad, we have to hold on to the knowledge that it will get better. And I find tremendous comfort in that, and in knowing that, there are better days ahead. And this is a really difficult time in the world, but it's not forever. And I really believe that, and take comfort in it.
Is there anything else that you would like to share that we have not had a chance to touch on together today?
I just want to share the prayer that you and your community will be safe and healthy, that you will have the courage to take on the difficult conversations that are happening in your country, that you will be able to look across the aisle and look past your political allegiances and your personal opinions, and just see the humanity in one another and in those that you encounter out in the world. And that by doing that, one person at a time, one conversation at a time, one relationship at a time, that's how we heal the world and the country and one another. And that's my prayer for you and for all of us.
Oh, thank you so much for that blessing and for the blessing of being with you today. Rabbi Emma Gottlieb, thank you so very much.